I have waited years, absolutely waited years, to see a smackdown of mainstream media like the one we saw last night during the course of the latest Republican debate for president. A lot of you may have stayed up late to watch it, or you caught little snippets of it here and there. I do admit, being that it was on CNBC, a lot of you may have had difficulty finding that network on your cable or your dish or your direct TV, simply because who the heck watches that network? It's the sister network to MSDNC, which means it shares a lot of the same news talent, and it has pretty much the same attitude, even though it calls itself a business network. You don't find a lot of people who are business friendly there. They're mainly what you'd call self-serving people like Jim Cramer, who was on the panel last night but was almost a non-entity other than shouting a few times at the candidates. Didn't fare very well for him, and it certainly didn't work out well for those colleagues of his who were sitting next to him and trying to run offense for the Democrat Party. It was just sweet to hear the responses from the Republicans on stage, many of whom have battled with each other, but found that last night things were so onerous that they ended up sticking up for each other in opposition to the baloney they were receiving from the panelists. Ted Cruz, in fact, one of those people who really sums it up well, he had a question about the government shutdown, and they were trying to make it look as if somehow shutting down the government over principle was bad for business, even though, of course, business doesn't really like the fact that we have all of this deficit spending going on and what they call quantitative easing, because business can't plan around that. So this was Cruz's response as he's being asked the question.
Does your opposition to it show that you're not the kind of problem solver American voters want?
You know, let me say something at the outset. The questions that asked so far in this debate illustrate why the American people don't trust the media. This is not a cage match. And you look at the questions: Donald Trump, are you a comic book villain? Ben Carson, can you do math? John Kasich, will you insult two people over here? Marco Rubio, why don't you resign? Jeb Bush, why have your numbers fallen? How about talking about the substantive issues people care about?
Does this count? Do we get credit for this one?
And Carl, I'm not finished yet. The contrast with the Democratic debate, where every fawning question from the media was, which of you is more handsome and wise?
So this is a question about the debt limit, which you have 30 seconds left to answer, should you choose to do so.
Let me be clear. The men and women on this stage have more ideas, more experience, more common sense than every participant in the Democratic debate. That debate reflected a debate between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. And nobody watching at home believes that any of the moderators has any intention of voting in a Republican primary.
Yeah, absolutely right. All of these people who are sitting there firing the questions off are all appendages of the Democrat Party, fellow travelers, as you might call them, Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. Not much of a difference between the two sides. Just pretty much all fellow travelers on their way to exploding the size of government. We'll talk about that in a little while, too, because you had some liberal Republicans who had a hand in that yesterday as well on Capitol Hill. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Just jumped up to 44. Sun is out now after some rain overnight, 11 minutes after 8 o'clock. As I was listening, watched the whole debate actually this morning, got up really early and watched it online. I wasn't able to stay up late for it last night, but watched the entire debate online. And I've got to tell you, some of these candidates I wouldn't support for president. I won't be voting for them in a primary, but I was so impressed by the way that they handled so many of the devious, despicable, devilish questions coming from the panel. Chris Christie among them. After the question about regulating sports betting, or what was it, fantasy football of all things, Christie said, "You're kidding me. We've got $19 trillion officially in debt in this country, and you're talking about fantasy football?" And with that, the moderators thought that they had to get down and try to fight with the candidates at that point.
All types of energy. And I've laid out...
In government?
No. Judge, you want me to answer, you want to answer. How are we going to do that? Because I got to tell you the truth. Even in New Jersey, what you're doing is called rude. So... We've laid out a national energy plan that says that we should invest in all types of energy. I'll tell you, you could win a bet at a bar tonight, since we're talking about fantasy football, if you ask who the top 3 states in America are that produce solar energy. California and Arizona are easy, but number 3 is New Jersey. Why? Because we worked with the private sector to make solar energy affordable and available to businesses and individuals in our state.
So he pretty much shut them down at that point, and it went on and on and on through the evening. At one point, John Harwood asked a question of Marco Rubio, which Harwood had said earlier in a story that he had done was wrong, but he followed through with the question anyway. And then after he got off air last night from the debate, he doubled down and went back to it. He'd already discredited this question before he got on air, and yet thought he was going to try to trip up Rubio with it. I mean, it was just amazing, the perfidy of these people who were sitting there on that panel. Even people in liberal media are saying that they lost control of the event, too. There was a story this morning that I happened to read on one of the major liberal blogs, and it said in the back room where most of the media happened to be sitting and watching it on monitors, there were actual groans about how poorly these people, well, they were out there and they were showing exactly what all those groaning people are all about. This is finally somebody pulling back the curtain and just showing you how just in the tank these people are for Democrats, and how they're looking to just try, and it goes back to 2012. You know, I remember they kept saying, look at all those tired old white people on stage. Funny, this year it's all the tired old white people over on the Democrat side. Now you've got all of these different people of all sorts of ethnic backgrounds campaigning as Republicans. The only person who stood out, I guess, 4 years ago was Michelle Bachmann, and then they tried to call her a loony because, well, she goes to church and believes in the Bible. And according to liberal land today, that makes you a lunatic. They will defend the rights of Islam, of course, all over the country, but when it comes to Christians, you've got to hammer away. Apparently, Christians are seen as a bigger danger. Never mind that the woman was a tax lawyer, very successful in that, and successfully raised 23 children in her household. That's quite a feat, but they had to continually attack her for that reason. The only person who broke the mold that year in the Republican Party. And now, of course, the tables are turned. You've got all sorts of ethnic minorities on the stage with the Republicans, and over at you got the geriatric white ward over at the Democrat stage. 8:14, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. One thing that is a takeaway that a lot of people are saying after last night's debate, Jeb Bush embarrassed himself when he tried to pick a fight with Marco Rubio. Jonathan V. Last, writing at the Weekly Standard, says the 3 winners of the night were pretty obvious: Rubio, Cruz, and Donald Trump. He said Rubio ended Jeb Bush's campaign with the kind of body shot that buckles your knees. Bush had started the fight when they were saying, well, you know, you've missed a lot of time in the Senate while you're campaigning for president, Mr. Rubio. You should resign. And then Rubio pointed out that John Kerry and Barack Obama had both missed far, far more votes in the Senate when they were campaigning for president. And then Bush decided he was going to jump on board and start hammering away and joining the fellow travelers. And with that, Rubio shut him down and said, you know what? Frankly, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, we used to be friends. And now you're just after me because you know your poll numbers are sagging. And according to this writer at Weekly Standard, Jeb's dead, baby, Jeb's dead. Pretty much the death knell for his campaign and probably for several other people who were involved. And he says we're down to a handful of just half a dozen candidates who are really viable now at this point. You can reach our program today, 736-0300, 736-0300. Also, my email is bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. You're up next at 8:15.
Hey, good morning, Bill. I just had on the usually watch that in this chart there with
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to get into that a little bit later. We're going to have a discussion about Benghazi a little later in the program because of some of the latest developments going on there, and I'm fighting with my telephone buttons here. I don't know why they're giving me a fit this morning. But I do want to point out, if you'd like to reach the show, 736-0300. Also coming up today, and usually I tease everything at the top of the hour, but I wanted to get into some of the comments from some of the candidates last night. Coming up about 8:40 this morning, we're going to be joined by David Kirk from the Boy Scouts of America. And just after 9 o'clock news this morning, Ruth Pierce, probably the last candidate we'll see in the studio who is running for City Council in Twin Falls. Ruth Pierce will be joining us in about 45 minutes, 50 minutes or so on the program. Before we wrap up this segment, got a couple of other points to make, too. Donald Trump, people said, Eric Erickson, who doesn't really like the man, said it may have been Trump's best debate performance. The first couple of debates, he looked out of his league, didn't he? And this one is a turnaround for him. Perhaps he sat down and actually did some homework beforehand. And I don't think he needed to do homework on issues. I think he needed to do a little homework on presentation. This was Trump as he was being questioned, and he really shuts the questioner down.
You have been very critical of Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, who has wanted to increase the number of these H-1Bs.
I was not at all critical of him. I was not at all. In fact, frankly, he's complaining about the fact that we're losing some of the most talented people. They go to Harvard, they go to Yale, they go to Princeton, they come from another country, and they're immediately sent out. I am all in favor of keeping these talented people here so they can go to work in Silicon Valley.
So you're in favor of increasing
I have not been at all critical of him.
Where did I read this and come up with this that you were...
Probably, I don't know, you people write this stuff. I don't know where you...
I didn't write this stuff.
Now, Trump actually may have had something like that on his website, his campaign website, and that may be where she happened to get it, but she had no response. She was just absolutely lost at that point. 8:18, and one last clip here. This is Ben Carson being accused of being a homophobe. Listen to his response.
They shouldn't automatically assume that because you believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, that you are a homophobe. And this is one of the myths that the left perpetrates on our society. And this is how they frighten people and get people to shut up. You know, that's what the PC culture is all about, and it's destroying this nation.
Wow, that was spot on, too, as well. Mr. Carson leading in many of the polls across the country. A new poll today shows Trump back in the lead, but you'll see some changes made because you're going to see Cruz and Rubio move up that ladder as well. And Jeb Bush might be in the negative numbers before we end this week. 19 after 8 o'clock. Hey, want to remind you, you heard on the air yesterday Dr. Jonathan Tripp and some of his staff from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls. They will be back on Wednesday of next week. We want to remind you, in fact, that the office is expanding. That was the nature of the show yesterday. So if you're looking for someone as a patient who can see you quickly and has available time to talk to you about what ails you, you might want to be a patient at Dr. Tripp's office. A growing practice here in town, located across from the main post office on Fillmore Street. We do it every Wednesday, in fact. We call it Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. We do it every Wednesday right here at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. Coming up, here's a surprise. There was a vote yesterday on this budget deal with President Obama. One of your Idaho congressmen voted no. One of your Idaho congressmen voted with the Democrats. Tell you what, during the break, figure out who was who. I want to thank the last couple of guests. These are guys who often wear uniforms, but they're people in our community who do the right thing. We had a debate about that yesterday, didn't we? About people in uniform. We'll get back to that a little later in the program, too, as well. In the meantime, I want to remind you that we will be getting back to some sunshine. Actually, skies have cleared out pretty well so far this morning. It's a little chilly right now. Had rain overnight, but that sunshine, and let's face it, it may not be as warm as Orlando, Florida here year-round, but we get plenty of sunshine in the high desert. And that means that sun is beating through your windows in your home, in your office, your automobile, and that sun contains all of those harmful UV rays that can bleach your furniture, your drapes, your carpet. And what you might want to do is consider calling Tint Lady, because Tint Lady will do a free estimate. They'll come out to your home or business and do that. They also do paint protection. We want to remind you, you can give a telephone call, set up an appointment at 736-8469. That's 736-8469. Or go online, tintladyidaho.com. They've been in business nearly a quarter of a century over there at 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls, locally owned and operated, open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday by appointment only, closed Sundays. I like to say they're a little bit like Chick-fil-A in that sense. And remember, don't squint, get tint. Here's something I wanted to share with you. I found this morning. Heritage Foundation actually found it at Forbes, and then Heritage Foundation shared it on Heritage Foundation's Daily Signal, which you can sign up for and get that in your email inbox every day with 4 or 5 great stories about what's actually going on in government you might not necessarily find in mainstream media. It's 8:45. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 44. Get this. Forbes says Taylor Swift earned $80 million last year. What does that have to do with government? Well, she would have to play concerts every day for 3 years to pay off 1 day of interest on the national debt. Get that? She would have to play concerts every day for 3. So she'd have 1,000 days of concerts, and she'd be able to pay off 1 day of interest on the national debt. And as many of you know, there was this effort by government, and John Boehner worked with Democrats. A large number of Republicans said no, but they've entered into a budget deal with Boehner's buddy, Barack Obama. And that budget deal is going to cost you much, much more and further jeopardize this country's ability to ever come out from this overwhelming debt which we have to deal with. You know, you reach a certain point. Japan has never been able to recover from its huge debts it ran in the late 1980s through the 1990s and the like, and they may never come out from under it, despite all of the great innovation and, you know, they're one of the leading countries when it comes to science in the world, may never come out of it. Some Republicans joined their buddy John Boehner, and they voted along with the Democrats and Barack Obama. Some Republicans said, no, we're not having any more of this. Now, we have 2 members of the House of Representatives from Idaho. You have one who represents most of the northern part of the state in the 1st District, and then you have one who represents most of the southern part of the state in the 2nd District. Would you like to guess how they voted? Because they did not vote together. They voted separately in opposite fashion. One of them is named Mike Simpson. Of course, he represents the district where I currently am sitting. The other is Raul Labrador, and he represents northern Idaho. Again, how did they vote? Well, Mike Simpson, he voted to spend more money that we don't have and voted with Boehner and Obama. Raul Labrador voted against spending more money, and he voted against Boehner and Obama. John Boehner said his farewell this morning on Capitol Hill and burst into tears. And what do you expect? It seems to be that he's always eating onions or something like that. The circus. I mean, they go on and they say things are going to be different. We heard the message. And then they go right back. The majority, anyway. Obviously, there had to be a lot of Republicans to go along with the Democrats here in order to get this thing passed. We're going to be different. And I'm going to hold up a picture of Ronald Reagan and wave it. See, we're conservatives. We've got pictures of Reagan. And then they go around and stab the people they promised in the back. Why does this keep happening? Now, I'm not spilling any beans here. When I get off air today, I have a telephone conference with Janice McGeachin, former member of the Idaho State Legislature, who may be a challenger to Mike Simpson in a primary. Now, I think she's obviously a little upset that I already broke the news about this, but I was getting people dropping me lines about it from all over the state saying it's a possibility she may run. So I sent her a message and I said, are you planning on it? She said, I haven't made up my mind yet. But I would tell her, if I talked to her, that I think that this might be the year where someone who's got good street credentials as a solid conservative patriot could really take Mike Simpson out. 8:48, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 43, and we have a caller with us. The number, of course, for News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com is 736-0300. That's 736-0300. You're up next, and you're on the air.
Morning, Bill. Well, Boehner may have broke into tears this morning, but in our house, we broke into cheers. We are so happy to see him stepping away. And that's to include stepping out away from Congress. I think it's one of the best things that could happen. With regard to your report about what was reported today in the Daily Signal, they do that on a regular basis, and I was not surprised because our Representative Mike Simpson normally votes in opposition to what Raul Labrador votes. And my attitude has always been to find out what Congressman Labrador thinks about the issue, find out how he probably will vote, and vote that way, knowing full well that Mike Simpson is going to vote in opposition. And I think it's a crying shame that that is the way we're being represented in this congressional district.
And of course, they're going to obviously elect Paul Ryan as the next speaker, but Labrador is still backing Daniel Webster, whose name is in the hopper. And Labrador was interviewed yesterday by the Washington Examiner. A friend of mine sent me the link and said that he is very, very cautious about this, and says in a few months, if there's no changes with Paul Ryan, in fact, just came in, Paul Ryan is elected new House Speaker. If there's no change in 3 months, Labrador says it's time to start all over again.
And that's wonderful, because that's something they can do, and it demonstrates that they are watching their leadership.
Yeah, and you know, they'll get criticized by media. Media will call them names. Media will say Republicans are Neanderthals and dragging their knuckles, and we need to spend, and provide more free lunch for all of the people, half the country out there that's getting it. But sooner or later, I mean, obviously, even the most thick-headed Democrat has to know you cannot keep running up the credit card to the point where you can no longer pay it off, and then you have nothing left in your own wallet at that point. Well, apply that to federal government. They know better. They just seem to think that someone else is going to keep paying their freight. But it's got to come to an end someday.
Well, and again, we've reached a point where the signal to each of us ought to be, if the majority of the media is coming down in favor of a position that each of us have taken that is in opposition to the position that we've taken, then we're probably taking the right position.
I would agree with that, and thank you much for the call. And, of course, the caller referenced the Daily Signal, as I did. Again, if you were to go, just do a quick search on your computer of the Daily Signal, and you can sign up for it there, and you can get those daily emails. I get them every morning. They come in just after 5 o'clock. Get them every morning, and I'll tell you what, it's a great resource. Really helps you look into the background of what's going on in Washington beyond what the liberal media wants you to know. You're up next, and you're on the air at 8:52, and welcome to KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. You know, there's two R's up there in the House and Senate. There's the Republicans and there's the Rhino, which are actually Democrats. So it doesn't surprise me one bit. The Republicans voted no, and the Rhinos voted yes. And Mike Simpson is one of the biggest ones I've been crying about for years. And everybody needs to wake up. And when these guys come to you and say, I promise this year is going to be different, just get them the hell out.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the telephone call. This is something I noted in a piece I wrote a couple of days ago. After I actually got a confirmation from Janice McGeachin that she was considering a primary challenge. That does not mean a commitment, but that means, you know, she's obviously consulting with family and friends and political allies. And I get the impression that a lot of people, and I wrote about this, Mike Simpson, a lot of people will say nice things about him because he came to their banquet once, or, you know, he managed to bring home a little bacon for their pet project. But I find that support for the man, while it may be wide, isn't very deep. And I think that perhaps Republicans in the establishment might be overlooking, and they keep thinking, all right, you know, we got rid of a Russ Fulcher, we pushed him aside. You know, you squeaked by is what you did. You squeaked by, and that there should be a message in there that the public attitude is changing and is becoming more and more. I mean, we're 5 years, well, no, let's see, Tea Party existence goes back to, good gosh, way back to 2000. I was at that first big rally in Washington in 2009, September 12th, 2009. I went back in 2010. And, of course, you had people in media and in politics saying, well, this movement won't last long. This is going to die out. No, it's simply, it's a new name for what Richard Nixon called the silent majority. That came from Pat Buchanan, I think, originally, and then speechwriting for Richard Nixon. It's the same group of people. It's middle Americans who realize they're being conned. And they're allowed to coalesce around a name every once in a while, and we seem to forget that they still have a lot of clout in this country, even though our open borders policy is trying to diminish that for obvious reasons, and I mean, that's very nefarious reasons, is to try to diminish that clout because they don't want people in this country saying no. But I'm going to tell you, it hasn't gone away, and it's only growing as more people look at this anemic recovery we've had over the last 7 years. And they're not happy about it. I was just reminded of the Tea Party formation. A lot of people credit Rick Santelli at CNBC for bringing it up and getting it started, and has taxed enough already for T, the acronym T. But there's a book out there that's written by a liberal columnist by the name of Will Bunch. Last name spelled B-U-N-C-H, and it's called The Backlash. And if you read Will Bunch's Backlash, he actually credits the start of the Tea Party movement after a certain talk show host who was then working in Delaware rallied about 300 people to show up for a congressman's town hall meeting where the congressman ended up leaving with his tail between his legs and eventually was pushed out of office. And my sister joked with me when she got a copy of the book. She said, half the first chapter is about you. Once in a while, I do a limbo and pat myself on the back. But he says in his book, that was really the first sign that things were going to be changing in this country. And what we did is a coworker of mine named Bill Rogers, the two of us got on the radio and we said to people, this is going on, this meeting's taking place. Your congressman has just voted for cap and tax, and we need to let him know how we feel. And he's also for Obamacare. And we turned out a crowd of 300 people. They got so nervous that they had to bring in law enforcement. Police came in and were standing alongside the walls with their pistols strapped to their sides, as if somehow we were going to rush the stage and, cart the congressman off and burn him at the stake, which was not obviously going to happen. I'm telling you, though, people are still ticked off in this country, and it's not getting any better. And the politics of this year, and any politician, and as again I said, I've never met Mike Simpson, but the more I hear about him, the more I wonder why he's even bothering. Unless, of course, it's good for him. Got a lot of sycophants in the office, and if he loses, he can go to work on K Street where all of his buddies are and make even more money, much more money, like a Cantor did when he lost his seat. But the situation out there for the Republicans in name only, the rhinos, is not good right now, and they better realize that it's not going to take too much. If you get a candidate who is well-spoken, looks sharp, dresses sharp, can put some money behind her campaign, I think that the writing is on the wall. And it may be time. Maybe this guy will even consider stepping down at this point. He just lost his major ally. His major ally walked off the podium today bawling. Mr. Boehner is gone, and things may well change for these people who think, hey, all we got to do is just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we'll just keep lying to the people. We'll keep making promises that we never intend to keep, and by gosh, those dumb dummies, they'll continue to vote us back into office. Not working anymore. Bill Colley with you. Hey, we've got a candidate for office coming up in just a few minutes. Ruth Pierce is joining us in studio. She is running for city council here in Twin Falls. She'll spend about 10, 15 minutes with us at the top of the hour. Well, just after the newscast. We say top of the hour. That means 9 o'clock. Radio parlance, we should probably explain that. 9 o'clock. News, though, first from Fox. Right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you this morning. Keep in mind, you can also drop me an email at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. Last name spelled Colley. bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com.